Ross is meeting his very young girlfriend Elizabeth's father for the first time, and he's not leaving a very good first impression at all. Can you tell what he's doing wrong here?
This is my father, Paul Stevens. Dad, this is Ross Geller.
It's great to meet you, Paul.
What's up? Jerry here. 都说咱中国人互相之间的称呼啊很复杂，你也肯定听说过老外们之间就简单很多，叫名字就行了。真的是这样吗？我们来做个小测试。Imagine this. You're at a rock concert and you bump into your boss. 咱该如何跟他打招呼呢？ I'll give you 3 options here. Hey, Mr. Johnson. Hey, Bob. Or Hey, Robert Johnson. What do you think? Or picture this. You're writing an email to a professor you've never met. Do you start with Dear Professor Smith, Dear John, or Dear John Smith? And what about this? You're meeting your girlfriend's or boyfriend's parents for the first time. Do you call them by their first names, last names, or full names? 看似很简单的问题, but the answers can be trickier than you think. Stick around until the end of the video to find the answers. And here's a hint. If you watch the whole video, you'll be able to answer these questions yourself. So let's dive right in. 正如咱每一个中国人都是有名、有姓、有身份证的，在英语文化圈里啊，人家也有名 ，first name 有姓 ，last name 还比咱多出了个 middle name. What's middle name in Chinese? 中间名嘛。Anyway, 把它们放在一起呢，就是全名 full name. 我们今天啊，就按照这个顺序来讲一讲，在不同的场景里如何的正确使用这各路名字的学问。First name, also known as forename, birth name. It is probably something that your parents fought for months over before you were born. That's why some people prefer the term given name, because it is, after all, given to you by the parent who won. First names are typically used in informal and casual settings. You would use them with friends, peers, and anyone you're familiar with. In most business settings, first names are also acceptable. 简单来说，日常工作生活中我们经常接触的大多数人，咱都可以直呼其名，其 first name。但是也有不行的，我们来看一些您需要注意的状况。首先是在学校 ，In most elementary and high schools, students call their teachers by last names. 当然，在姓氏前面啊，一定要加上 title 或者 honorifics， 也就是 Mr、Mrs、Miss、Ms 之类的称谓词。It's pretty easy to find prank videos of high school students calling their teachers by first names. 有兴趣的可以找来看看老师们的反应，挺有意思的。
Good morning, Anna.
We've been through this. What is my name?
Hey, what's up, Garrett? How you been?
Absolutely not. We are not friends. Kevin, get out of my office.
But in some progressive schools and most universities, students and teachers might be on a first name basis. 但即便您是这些所谓进步的学校或者大学里的学生啊，假设您的教授叫 James Smith， 我还是建议您称呼他 Professor Smith。如果他不是教授，咱也应该称呼人家 Mr. Smith until he specifically tells you to call him James. Why? Because it never hurts to come off as a respectful person. 刚才说了，在工作环境中 most people feel more comfortable when referred to by their first name, as it creates a sense of familiarity and ease. 但是在如下这些情境中 say, if you're meeting a senior executive for the first time, or if you work in a very formal industry like law or finance, or if you're in sales or customer service and you really want your client to feel respected, you should address them by their last names, with an honorific 称谓词 in front, of course. 当然，您在这么做的时候会发现啊，很多人马上就会告诉您 ，just call me James。这以后咱就可以放心大胆的用他们的名字 first name 了。写 email 或者发信息的时候啊，原则也是一样。It's usually safe to use first names, especially if the other person has used your first name. For example, if you receive an email that starts with Hi Jerry, you can usually respond with Hi Tom. Unless if you're emailing some VIP 中 P and you want to show a lot of respect. Before we move on, here are some more helpful tips regarding first names. 有些坑啊，我已经踩过了，和您讲讲 您就别猜了。很多北美人更喜欢别人用 first name 来称呼他，明明辈分很大，身份很高，但就是坚持要你叫他 John。在这样的情况下，咱需要做的就是恭敬不如从命 ，Go ahead and call him John。到这儿我得多说几句，可别说我没提醒您。咱中国人遇到老人就尊称人家爷爷奶奶的传统美德啊，到了北美可就变成恶习了。除了开玩笑埋汰自己的朋友以外啊，您可千万别管大街上的老人叫 Granny、Grandpa， 小心人家拿拐棍抡你。另外，一定不能把中文的习惯生搬硬套，翻译成英语就想当然的用来称呼人家。教英语这么多年，我什么奇葩都见过。有人套用小云姐、大成哥，创造出了 Sister Karen、Brother James， 这里边产生歧义的空间可老大了。还有，其实我也知道人家是尊重我才想叫我一声戴老师的，但是当他们真管我叫 Teacher 戴的时候啊，还有个小建议，在初次交谈中啊，咱应该尽量早的问，并且记住对方的名字，并以此称呼对方。这样不仅可以表达尊重和礼貌，也是在给自己提供方便。比如去餐馆吃饭的时候，如果能迅速记住服务生的名字，您甚至会因此得到更好的服务。这里边的学问可不小，有空啊，咱另起一篇讲讲。下面我们来聊聊英语当中的姓氏。Last name。AKA surname or family name is usually passed down from generation to generation. Last name 通常在更正式或者表示尊重的情景当中使用。Using last names to address colleagues or superiors displays a level of professionalism and respect. 在下面的这些环境里，用姓氏 last name 来称呼同事或者上级可能是更合适的。Formal workplaces, including law firms, financial institutions, government offices, hospitals, as well as military and police force. 当然，在姓氏前面，咱们都要加上 honorific 称谓词或者叫敬语，比如 Officer Smith, Sergeant Johnson, Dr. Robbins, Captain Dye. Man, my last name doesn't sound good anywhere. 在媒体报道里，一个人除了第一次被提及时会用到全名，接下来啊，很可能只用姓氏来指代。For example,in a news report, you might hear something like, Today, we spoke with Dr. Emily Rose Johnson at her lab in New York. Johnson is a leading expert in climate science.
The suspect, 32-year-old Rakeem Stephen Tate, turned a bad decision into a worse decision. After leaving the store, Tate was charged with openly carrying a prohibited weapon.
另外，在正式的社交场合下 like a formal dinner or a wedding, it is customary to use last names. For example, at a wedding, the announcer might say, May I present Mr. and Mrs. Anderson? 怎么样？影片开头的几个问题，您是不是基本有答案了？ Stick around to the end of this video to find out if you're right. Now let's deal with the middle name. Are middle names important in North America? Not really. 有些人啊，压根儿就没有 middle name. In many cases, the middle name is used primarily for official documents and not much else. It is not uncommon for colleagues or even close friends to be unaware of each other's middle names. In fact, in everyday life, middle names are often reduced to just an initial, appearing only on formal documents or when filling out forms. By the way, an initial refers to the first letter of your name, written in uppercase with a period after it. Initial 就是把名字缩写成它的第一个字母，要大写，并且在后边再加个点儿。Full name, aka legal name, whole name, typically includes the first name, middle name, if you have one, and last name. 在正式文件，比如驾照、护照、合同或者法律文件上，必须用到 full legal name. 发表专业或者学术文章时候的署名啊，一般也会用到全名。在正式的社交场合里，比如 award shows, graduation ceremonies, formal dinners or weddings, 全名也经常会在介绍某人的时候被用到。For example, at a formal event, the host may say something like, Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. James Arthur Baker. 在日常对话中，基本上只有被介绍或者自我介绍的时候才可能用到全名。Over time, the use of full names has become less common in everyday life. 对了，有时候有人，特别是老婆、老妈或者老板这三老之一啊，会叫我们的全名。 但这可不是啥好事儿。不出意外的话，这意味着您做错了事儿了，被抓包了，人家找你算账来了。When that happens, run and good luck. Making these videos takes a lot of effort. So before I give you the answers to the questions at the beginning, be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. 好，现在我们再回来看看影片开头的几个问题。You're at a rock concert and you bump into your boss. Do you say, "Hey, Mr. Johnson," "Hey, Bob," or "Hey, Robert Johnson"? Here's the answer. It depends on the relationship you have with your boss and the culture of your workplace. If you usually call your boss by his first name at work, it obviously would be appropriate for you to say, "Hey, Bob," in this casual setting as well. But if you have never called him Bob at work, 这说明老板大人从来也没说过让咱叫他 Bob 就好。如果是这样啊，那咱还是用 Hey Mr. Johnson 来打招呼更合适。Using the full name, Hey Robert Johnson, is going to make this weird. Don't do it. Nobody does it. 您答对了吗？我们来看下一个问题。You're writing an email to a professor you have never met. Do you start with Dear Professor Smith, Dear John, or Dear John Smith? Here's the answer. In this case, it's better to be too formal than not formal enough. Starting the email with Dear Professor Smith shows respect for the professor's position. Using Dear John should be okay after you get to know each other well. But for first communication, it seems to be too casual. And by the way, Dear John Smith is generally not used in email situations. You're meeting your partner's parents for the first time. Do you call them by their first names, last names, or full names? And here's the answer. Again, it depends. In many Western cultures, it is common to call someone's parents by their first names. But in more formal and traditional settings, especially if you're meeting them for the first time, it is definitely safer to use Mr. and Mrs. followed by their last name. Using their full names would be unusual in this context. But you know what? Here's an even better option. You can simply ask your partner beforehand what their parents prefer to be called. Now let's circle back to our very first question. What do you think Ross did wrong?
This is my father, Paul Stevens. Dad, this is Ross Geller.
It's great to meet you, Paul.
不论 Ross 是怎么想的 ，by calling Paul，Ross 表达出来的就是一种我也岁数不小了，多少还是个教授呢，就不用这么仰望你了吧的感觉。而 Ross 的年纪正是 Paul 作为 Elizabeth 的老爸很介意的，这不是自己往枪口上撞的吗？这就是为啥后边 Paul 的反应是这样的。
It's great to meet you, Paul.
I usually prefer Liz's boyfriends who address me as Mr. Stevens.
Of course, Mr. Stevens.
Yeah. So, Ross, what's your problem?
Ross, man, 我看着都替你着急。By the way， 这个片段是我在做这部讲解 Friends 的影片时遇到的，老有意思了，你应该去看看。I'm sure the link is somewhere. Look and you shall find.